This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Ken told us last night, love is at the heart of our life, as he chose 2 readings about love. Now, when Jesus asks us to love one another, he is actually inviting us to participate in God's characteristic action, to align ourselves with that joy which is the ultimate activity in the universe. The whole purpose of life on this planet is to produce loving creatures. I'm quoting something that I read somewhere. The complex, painstaking process of creating humanity amidst the whole of life on our planet is driven by God's loving. The immense time scale involved is for the creation of lovers. The slow growth in human understanding, all the long travail of humanity in its noble moments, is for the purpose of loving. The triumph of the human spirit over setback or calamity or suffering and evil in its many forms is to produce loving people. Nothing matters more. Nothing is more fundamental. Nothing else that exists in time also transcends time with such power. The whole purpose is for us to become loving beings, like God. It is as simple and as profound as that. Jesus asks us to participate in the fundamental activity of God, and in so doing, we will find our fulfillment. Now, I wish I could remember where I read that, because I agree with it wholeheartedly. Is it asking too much? Too big an ask for little earth creatures whose lives only last a fraction of time, to tackle being like God? Some would say, yes, it is asking too much. It's in fact both arrogant and ridiculous. But not so, says the Bible. The Bible insists that we have a special nature and a special destiny. The ancients who created the text intuited that we have a remarkable likeness to God. Indeed, sometimes it's harder to believe not what the Bible tells us about God, but what it says about humanity. It has an amazing, lofty vision of humanity. One of the 2 stories of creation in Genesis says that we are made in the image of God, male and female. The second says that God's own breath or spirit is in us and constitutes our very being. Later, Paul revels in the fact that the Holy Spirit witnesses in our mind and heart that we are children of God, joint heirs with Christ. Humanity and God have a likeness. As astounding as it is true. We and that hidden, awesome mind that brought time and space into being share a similarity. Jesus asks us to participate in the characteristic activity of God. It's not a futile thing to ask humans to be loving. In us there is a divine spirit, a godlike potential which longs to be fulfilled. We're made for the purpose of loving one another and all creation and our Creator. And as the first letter of John insists, we can't say we love God unless we are loving to one another. These are inseparable. But loving is indigenous to us. We're hardwired for it. More so than we would ever guess from looking at the selfishness and the cruelty in humanity. But we're called to be loving because it's the purest expression of our spirits. Now, this loving cannot be understood by looking up a dictionary or analysing the Greek and Hebrew words used for love. And again, as Ken said last night, reading the text doesn't teach us loving. We must open our hearts to it. To get to the crux of loving, the meaning of loving, we must spend time with Jesus of Nazareth. He makes clear the hidden loving of God for this world. His life shows what the gospel means by love. He said, love one another as I have loved you. Now this cuts out any sentimentality or soft stuff or sugary stuff. Loving Jesus style includes challenging corruption and deceits, caring for the welfare of our enemies, lending without expectation of being repaid, forgiving 70 times 7 those who hurt us, turning the other cheek, giving without wanting gratitude or praise, confronting with honesty the hypocrisies of religion, expressing anger when one's fellows are being exploited, cleansing the temple, embracing outcasts and welcoming sinners and strangers and caring for all in need, accepting that sometimes misunderstanding will be our lot, and that rejection and suffering may be the only apparent result of our holiest efforts. The whole of the life of Jesus displays love for us, but it reaches its climax on the cross. There he is crucified, forgiving his enemies and full of compassion for those around him. This is ultimate loving. This is what it means to be divine. It's also what it means to be fully human. I want to tell you a story from John Philip Newell that I've shared with you before. It's from his book, A New Harmony. It says, Julian of Norwich, the 14th century mystic, says, we're not simply made by God, we are made of God. It means, well, she says it has enormous implications. The divine passion for what is just and right is our true heart's desire, deeper than the apathies and falsenesses that have disabled us. And he tells us about an experience he had when he was in Portsmouth. Often I would wake at dawn to the sound of a pair of mourning doves cooing at the top of our chimney. One day, as I worked at my desk, I became aware of the sound of struggle in the chimney. I was busy working to a deadline and didn't want to be interrupted, but the sound came closer and closer. Finally, I realised I had to do something about it. So I got down on my hands and knees in front of the fireplace, which years before had been sealed off, and began pulling out the pieces of mid-20th century newspaper that had been used to block off the chimney. Decades of dirt and dust were clouding the study, and I became aware of a growing anxiety within myself. What am I going to do with this creature when it arrives? I placed my hand up the flue and felt the burden. When I touched her, she became entirely still, frozen with fear. Gently I drew her down into the hearth of the open fireplace. And there she sat in my hands. It was one of the beautiful white mourning doves that sang to me each dawn. But now she was covered in soot and traumatised with fear. I took her out into the garden and placed her high on the wall, but still she sat, stunned. I went back into the study to get on with my work, and an hour later returned to the garden. And there she was, still in a state of shock. But this time, as I approached, she flew. And as she flew, the soot fell off. In the midday sun, she became again an image of beauty and of freedom. For days after this event, I was haunted by the memory of the mourning dove. It wasn't the memory of her stuck in the chimney that haunted me. It was the sight of her sitting on the wall, traumatised by her fall and covered with soot. I realised she represented something in me. It had been unawareness that led her to topple into the chimney. And sitting on the wall, even though strictly speaking she was free from her fall, she wasn't yet truly herself. She was the same mourning dove who sang to me each day at dawn, but she would not recover her true form and beauty until she flew again. How are we to set one another free? How can we be part of releasing wholeness and beauty again in our lives and our world? Too often we hold the impression that soot is our essence. But truly, at the heart of our being is the beauty of God and the wisdom of God. However, we are infected by sin so deeply that we need the medicine of grace if we are to be well. The gift of grace, which is awakened in us through compassion, restores to us the heart of our nature. It is grace that will free us from the unnaturalness of what we are doing to one another and to the earth. There's nothing artificial about loving. It doesn't always come easily, but it is the most natural of disciplines to learn. And it fits us like nothing else. In closing, I just want to briefly look at the reading from Acts. Both the letters and the Gospel of John, we heard from, address particular issues in that community. And it seems the command to love one another is really for their local community. Today's story from Acts blows out of the water the idea that our attention should be only for our group. Peter is forced to recognise that the Holy Spirit is just as active in the lives of the Gentiles as the Jews. It's a reminder that our job is to be alert to wherever we find the Holy Spirit bubbling in the lives of people and to work with it, not against it. This loving people is not something alien. It isn't a suggestion or a recommendation, it's a commandment. It's to be the foundation of all that we do each day. And as we open our hearts, it can be as natural as breathing. And I'd like us to remain seated now as we sing hymn 641. This is my will, my one.